recorded.
Okay, so it's 2 p.m., so I'll go ahead and get started. This is Anna Delia from the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers. Thank you all for being on this webinar today, and thank you for changing from in-person to a webinar, but we hope to still have a really engaging conversation on the 2020 census. As you may have heard, this webinar will be recorded. That way we can upload that to our website for all of our members along with the presentation slides. So because this is our first time using this format, I'm just going to go over a quick few logistics before we get started. So one, again, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties throughout the call with audio or visual, we have Craig, Director of Member Services, on the line, so you can call his office or text him on his cell for any assistance. Both numbers were included in the reminder email you should have received an hour ago and then yesterday afternoon. But just to read them off again, office number is 609-341-2022, extension 4215, and his cell is 609-577-6273. Also, please try to keep background noise to a minimum. So you can do that by, if you're using your microphone on your laptop or computer, you can bring your mouse over to your name, click on the arrow on the right-hand side of your name and hit mute. Or if you're using your phone or cell, you can just mute yourself on your device. And then this is also, again, meant to be an interactive session. We hope you will ask the speakers questions after their presentations and join us for a discussion afterwards. So there is a chat box on your left-hand side. You can ask a question at any time, and then I'll read those questions out after each presenter. And additionally, you can always just unmute yourself on your line, and after the presenter is done with their presentation, there'll be time to ask a couple of questions. And so again, we will be recording this webinar, so all that information will be up on our website afterwards. So if everything is good and everyone can hear and see the slides that's up on the screen right now, I'll just turn it over to Kate, our Camden Affinity Group co-chair, to get us started.
Great. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me? Or Anna, can you at least hear me? To confirm? Yeah. Okay, great. Great. Hi, everybody. This is Kate Barrett. I'm a senior manager at Campbell Soup Company in the Community Affairs team. And on behalf of myself and Sandy Capel from Subaru, we are the co-chairs of the Camden Funders Group. We just wanted to welcome you to the call and thank you for joining to talk with everyone about this important topic around the census in Camden. We really look forward to having a good discussion, and always appreciate you all just being on the line, and always also just open to your feedback on future topics that we should be discussing as well. So we look forward to a great discussion. And with that, I will kick us off. To our first speaker is going to be Ian Hall, the Deputy Regional Director of the U.S. Census Bureau, and he is going to be talking to us, just kind of giving an operational update on the Get Out the Count efforts in Camden. So a little background on Ian. As I mentioned, Deputy Director of the U.S. Census Bureau's New York region. The New York Regional Office is responsible for all the data collection, dissemination, and geographic operations in a bunch of states, so Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Vermont, Puerto Rico as well. The regional offices play a really important role in getting the U.S. Census Bureau's message out to the community, so they meet with local organizations to improve participation in census and surveys, host workshops to teach the public about the use and value of the data, and also serve as context for local media. So with that, I will hand it over to Ian so we can now hear from him.
Great. Thanks, Alana. Real quickly, back to Anna. I think my screen refreshed and I'm no longer a presenter. So if you want me to move forward with the slides, I think you need to activate me again.
Okay.
Looks like it's good now.
Okay, good. You can move on?
I'm good now. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Thank you for that help.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ian Hull. I am the Deputy Regional Director for the New York region of the Census Bureau. We are responsible for all data collection activities in New Jersey, and I'm eager to speak with each of you this afternoon about some of our efforts with the 2020 census. It is my understanding that everyone has a basic understanding of the 2020 census, so my briefing is going to kind of skip a lot of those aspects. If you don't have that baseline understanding, no worries. We can provide supplemental information after this meeting or simply present a separate presentation to you or your group to make sure that you have that foundational information. I think the overall goal for today is just to kind of provide a very quick update, and then I want to allow ample time in case you have specific questions that I can address or make sure that we get answers to you. So that's going to be my overall goal. I'd like to pause and recognize one of my colleagues is on the phone as well. Thomas Mayfield is a partnership specialist that lives and works in the Camden area. And he is a great resource for each of you to reach out to. So if you don't have his contact information, we can make sure that we connect you with Thomas. Again, he works in the community and can be that kind of very quick conduit into the Census Bureau. If you need more information on things, you're not able to find that really cool flyer that we use, he would be a resource to help with that. So Thomas is on the phone and may be able to jump in at different points if you guys have some very specific questions about Camden. All right.
Yeah,
with that,
I'm definitely here.
Awesome. Thanks, Thomas. So hopefully everyone's now seeing the next slide where I kind of say that the census is safe, it's easy and important. And that's our overall critical message about the census. And if we were doing that introductory presentation, I would kind of go into the very detailed specifics of why is the census safe? How is it important? And why is it so critical, or why is it so easy to complete? But today, I'm going to try to focus a little bit on where we stand with recruiting, promoting our 2020 census jobs. Going to talk a little bit about how we continue to build a foundation of trusted voices and sharing that message that the census is safe, easy, and important. And then I'm going to discuss a little bit of our preparation for some of the future operations as we look forward to 2020 and a way that some community partners can provide some critical information to make sure that we have a successful 2020 census in Camden. So first off is moving. All right, I've hit my first technical hiccup. I am trying to click move forward and it's not. Is it?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let me see. Sorry, bear with me one moment.
It's okay. So while we're trying to move the slides forward, what I can kind of say is the next slide is going to be talking a little bit about our jobs. And although we often say that the census is a national event, the only way that it'll be successful is if we conduct it at the local level. And we mean that in a variety of ways. We need to make sure that we have partners at the local level that are carrying the message about the safety and importance of the census. But we also need to recruit and hire people at the local level. When it comes time for non-response follow-up, the operation will commence next spring and next summer, where the Census Bureau will visit non-responding housing units. We need to ensure that we're hiring people from every neighborhood, every community in Camden and throughout New Jersey. We know that it will only be successful if we have a diverse applicant pool that represents the greater community. So right now we're in a very active recruiting standpoint throughout the state of New Jersey, highlighting that the Census Bureau has jobs. And that's where we have a lot of partnership specialists and recruiting assistants throughout Camden and southern New Jersey carrying that message. It is easy for people to apply to work for the 2020 census. they can do so by going to 2020census.gov/jobs. Most of our positions are flexible with very flexible hours, part-time work. Some people may only be able to work for us for a couple evenings a week and maybe a few hours on the weekend. That's okay. So this could be a great second job. It could be a great job for someone that's looking for just a little extra spending money, or someone that may have other commitments during the day, but then have the ability to work at different points to earn some extra income. Looks like the slides are slowly coming back up. Let me see if I can progress. I still can't.
Yeah, I still am having trouble moving them forward. I thought maybe bringing them back up would help.
That's okay. I'm going to keep going to respect everybody's time. I actually have my slides in front of me, so I can follow along, and then we can make sure that they get sent out to everyone. So I can let you know I'm looking at a slide that lists a bunch of the positions, and just so everyone's kind of aware, the majority of people that we'll hire next year will be our census takers and help us with the different operations when we get into the enumeration phase of the 2020 census. And the starting pay rate in Camden County actually just increased. It is now $17.50 an hour. So everyone that is hired in Camden County to work in the community for the 2020 census, the starting pay rate is $17.50. We have a pretty big goal that we need to reach. In New Jersey as a whole, we need to recruit approximately 63,000 people to work for us, or we need to recruit 63,000 people to ensure that we have enough people to complete the 2020 census jobs. The next slide I would be presenting right now would show where we kind of stand in southern New Jersey. Okay, so the slide up right now is the one I was kind of trying to talk through that just lists some of the basic pay rates in Camden County and lists that website where you would go to apply or instruct other people to apply. And we have the ability at the Census Bureau to come out and help. So if there are community organizations, other businesses, or schools that want us to come out and talk about the jobs, we have recruiting assistants that can come and help with that process. I was then going to go to the next slide if someone's already helping kind of progress the slides.
I'm trying. It's just moving slowly. Right now, I'm just going to send out the slides to everybody on the webinar, and then we'll continue to try and work through and get the slides back moving.
No worries. Okay, so the next slide that I'm looking at kind of has a little bit of a deep dive into some of the counties in southern New Jersey and kind of show you our goal for applicants and where we kind of stand. And so in Camden County, we anticipate needing a little over 3,000 applicants in order to conduct all of the 2020 census jobs. And you can kind of see that now if you're following along online. We currently have 1,362 current applicants in Camden County, representing about 45% of our goal. So we have a long ways to go, and we definitely need help carrying that message because, again, kind of how I introduced this topic, we need to make sure that we have people from every community and the right amount of people in order to conduct those operations. That's my plug for jobs. The other basic update that I wanted to provide today starts on the next slide. We are working on developing that base of community partners and trusted voices. Again, I fully recognize that I cannot go into every community and share the message that the census is safe, that it's easy, and that it's important. So we have partnership specialists such as Thomas out working and working with groups such as the one here today to develop some of those community partnerships. We've really improved the materials that we have for our partners. The next number of slides kind of outline some of the materials that are available from the 2020 census website that people can access when they're out talking in their communities about the importance of the census. Some of the hot topics that I want to kind of reach out to and discuss right now. One of the first things is we have a new guide for partners on how to help with self-response. We know a lot of community organizations want to make sure that their communities are fully counted. This guide provides some insight into the do's and don'ts when it comes to helping people respond to the census. The next thing, how the 2020 census will invite everyone to respond, is a really great infographic that explains the actual process. We have a lot of information on census confidentiality. Another big thing to talk about is that the language guides were recently released. And so if we can go to the next slide, just as a quick little reminder for everybody, we will be providing language guides and language videos. Think of YouTube videos, a how-to video to respond to the census in the 59 non-English languages that are listed kind of in the center largest box on this screen. So there's a list of 59 languages, and those language guides are out now. So you can start to refer to them. The videos we expect to be out early in January. On this slide, it also lists on the left side, the first two columns that you see are the 12 non-English languages. They're the same between the two columns, that we will provide direct language support for the internet self-response option and census questionnaire assistance, which is the fancy term for calling a toll-free number, speaking to a census representative, and you'll be able to do that in the 12 non-English languages that are listed there. So we're releasing a lot of information right now that can be used by partners. I mentioned, or on that slide previous, there was a discussion of, some people ask, well, why do you ask the specific questions? So if we scroll forward now 2 slides, we have, you will see an example of a flyer that lists, why do we ask each question? So we're only going to ask some very basic questions on the census. Some people think it's a very invasive form, asking numerous questions. It's a pretty simple process. And so when we kind of go forward 2 slides, we'll see that the basic questions that we ask each person are name, sex, age, date of birth, Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin, race, relationship, and then a few operational questions. And this infographic explains exactly why we ask each of these questions and what the purpose of asking those questions is. So that can be sometimes provided to community members that have those types of questions. There it is, highlighted in green border. Again, why do we ask each of the questions? I just took kind of some quick screenshots of the flyer, but they're available online for printing as PDFs. Also mentioned the overall safety of the census. The next 2 slides show some of the flyers that we have that go into the census confidentiality. The first set are in English. We have started to translate them into the 12 non-English languages that we are directly supporting online and on the phone. So the next slide actually highlights one in Arabic, just to give an example that it is available in multiple languages, because we recognize that when people don't feel safe, they're not going to respond to the census. So we need to carry that message that every piece of information that the Census Bureau collects is protected by Title 13. That prevents the Census Bureau from releasing any information that could be used to identify an individual or an individual housing unit to any government, including law enforcement. The next slide also indicates some of the other outreach materials that are available. We have a number of posters, additional fact sheets for specific different types of population groups, whether it's the military, rural audiences, and then some other types of fact sheets that focus on different types of partnerships. So whether it's the business community, community-based organizations, schools, things such as that.
Oh, no, just, that's from the parent, because they're my, usually they're my parent. And then it's the kids.
But they didn't providing a little bit of feedback for someone, so if it could go on mute, that might be helpful.
But the parent happens to be the students.
If everyone just move their line. You can mute on, there's a microphone if you're using the audio.
That's who I met. You know what? I probably didn't have it, but I don't remember. You probably didn't. She emailed today and was like, "Hey, Emery's trying to find stuff out."
I think someone isn't muted. Okay. Okay. I think we're good. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the message is that we have improved a lot of the handouts and materials that we have available for partners, and we're trying to be able to improve the messaging that we're providing to communities. So that information is out there. The next slide kind of highlights some additional ones. It sounds like we're going to send this information out. And again, all of this information is available on our 2020
I think Sade and the team at
.gov.
the team over there are a master and are
A lot of people have started to add.
To bring in more.
Sorry, everyone could just make sure that their line is.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Are there things that like the student team is like,
Their laptop computer?
can actually be more helpful in like trying to get things in place for them and then being able to say, here you go. This is
Anna,
this
is
Yeah.
Kiki. Is it possible for you to mute everyone except the presenter?
do all that. So we're trying to like,
yeah.
figure out how to better.
What?
Yes, I see the support to schools because they are.
Maybe
that's a incorporate.
What's the first three lines of your number? It's the 212 number, right?
Yes, I'm 212-882-2102.
Okay, so I'll mute everybody else.
All right.
Okay.
Well, hopefully they can hear me. Okay. So what I was trying to say is, and I think I'm just going to try to speed up this portion of the presentation. We've got a lot of materials. They're available from our Census website, 2020census.gov. Some people have been asking about, can we see what the form's going to look like? Can we see what the questions are? And the answer is yes. We do have a sample copy available. The next slide actually kind of has a screenshot of what the actual form will look like when it is mailed to respondents next year. So when we kind of jump forward to the next slide, you will be able to see that. Uh-oh. Okay. So again, lots of more materials. One of the big things that I wanted to also highlight on a future slide was our Statistics in Schools program. We have great resources for schools. We have age-appropriate, grade-appropriate curriculum from kindergarten through 12th grade. So schools can become active partners next year carrying the message about the census. And this program was very successful during the 2000 and 2010 censuses. So we hope to carry that momentum forward into the 2020 census. And a lot of that material is available now. The screen you should see right now on the presentation is just an example of what the form will look like. Very short, easy to complete. And then my last update was just to kind of introduce some of our field operations. So a future slide lists some of the timelines for some of our future operations. These are going to be the operations that we actually conduct during the 2020 census to enumerate people. And we need some help from some of our partners. There are two operations that we will conduct next year. One is referred to as service-based enumeration, and this operation is geared towards ensuring we count people that are temporarily experiencing homelessness. This operation is conducted over a very short period of time from March 30th of 2020 through April 1st of 2020. What we do is we outreach with service-based providers. So these are providers that help support people that are experiencing homelessness. So this may be emergency shelters or temporary shelters. It could be regularly scheduled mobile food vans. Anyone that's providing regular services to people that are experiencing homelessness, we need to identify, and then we will go to those service providers during that 3-day period to enumerate people that are experiencing homelessness. On the last day, because we recognize some people do not choose to receive services, we will conduct an overnight count the night leading into April 1st, 2020, to ensure that we do count everyone, and that'll be a head count. So one of the big things that we're asking for on the next slide is input from partners. So if there are community-based organizations that have specific information on the service-based enumeration operation, so this would either be locations where people can receive services that are experiencing homelessness, or they could actually also be the temporary outdoor locations. So this could be anything from a specific park where people may congregate, to underpasses, to parking lots, whatever type of outdoor location where people in Camden reside outdoors while they're experiencing homelessness. We need to know about that, and that's information that can be provided to the Census Bureau to ensure that when we start this operation at the end of March, we're aware of all the locations to ensure we get a complete count. Similarly, we have another operation here that's referred to as ETL, which is the enumeration at transitory locations. So this would be places where people don't usually have a usual household elsewhere. So these might be campgrounds, RV parks. They could be carnival grounds, fairgrounds, marinas, motels or hotels that are used for long-term residency. We need to know about these facilities as well, because we will conduct enumeration at transitory locations beginning in early April, continuing through early May. So again, that's another place where partners can provide us detailed information about the location of service-based enumeration places and enumeration at transitory location places. We look forward to continuing to partner with our partners. So that was kind of the major topics that I wanted to address. Again, to kind of recap, I know we had a few interruptions. Focusing on jobs, we need to get the message out about jobs and recruiting, and we're here to help with that. We've improved a lot of the materials that are available that help to explain the census, how it's going to happen, the importance of the census, and the safety of it. And then finally, a few ways that partners can get even more involved if they have specific information about some of these special populations that don't live in traditional housing units. So I think with the idea at this point is I'm gonna pause, stop. I don't know if there have been any like chats that have come in, or if we're going to try to open it up to general questions.
Yes, so certainly, sorry for any interruptions. People should have received the slides as well in an email. I do have one chat question asking, could you please say something about the need for workers who speak languages other than English?
Absolutely. So we need people that speak multiple languages in all of our communities, because we recognize that oftentimes people that may choose not to respond, or may not know how to respond, or may not just even know that the census is happening, sometimes live in communities that may be language isolated. So it is critical that we have people that speak the multiple languages that are spoken throughout Camden. So we're working towards that. We as an agency finally received the approvals necessary next year that we will have the ability to hire non-citizens in specific situations where there is a language need and we do not have citizens in the applicant pool that can fill that language need. So that came very recently. So we're pleased about that, because in our past censuses we've known we've had to rely on non-citizens to help in some specific communities to get into that community, because they have that language need, and they help to represent that community. So yes, there is a huge need for language support from a hiring perspective.
And then I have another question, that if you would please share a copy of the materials to me so I can post it to the group.
Yeah, so the slides can absolutely be shared, and they're available. I took some screenshots, and so they come from the 2020 census website. So if there are specific ones that you want the explicit link, I can work to get that. But a lot of them are pretty easy to find on the 2020census.gov website. But I can work with the organizers of this meeting to make sure any materials that you need are shared.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? You can either type them in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and ask directly. Well, if anyone has any other, oh, there we go, there's contact information. And then the contact information is also in the PDF of the slides that I sent out to everybody. If anyone has any other questions, they can certainly type it in the chat box. We can make sure to get it to Ian. But for now, we'll move on to Kate, if you want to introduce Alana.
Great. All right, so our next speaker is Alana Vega, Kids Count Coordinator from ACNJ. As a Kids Count Coordinator, Alana is responsible for collecting, analyzing, and organizing state, county, and city level data relating to the well-being of New Jersey's children for ACNJ's Kids Count publications. The Kids Count report provides comprehensive data about child well-being for policymakers, advocates, grant makers, and the public. Much of the information from Kids Count comes from data provided by the U.S. Census Bureau, reinforcing the importance of an accurate count for improving outcomes for New Jersey children and families. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alana to talk more about her work.
Hi, so thank you for that introduction, and thank you, Anna, for asking me to present today, and thank you, Ian, for giving sort of that introduction to what the census is. Just one logistical, oh, never mind, I'm a presenter. So, thank you, Anna. So for those who may not be familiar with ACNJ, we're a statewide nonprofit child advocacy group. And as was mentioned, I am the Kids Count Coordinator, and so ACNJ is also the New Jersey grantee for the National Kids Count Project. So I work with census data frequently. ACNJ, in addition to our advocacy work, we are also coordinating the statewide nonprofit effort at organizing a complete count throughout the state. And so we're part of a larger statewide coalition that includes a number of different organizations focused on different demographic subgroups that may be likely to be missed in the upcoming census count. And I'll talk a bit more about undercounted populations. But some of the members of our coalition, for those on the phone so they know, are the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, Wind of the Spirit, Make the Road New Jersey, the League of Women Voters, Latino Action Network Foundation, and also the Asian American Federation. So we have a number of different groups working on this effort throughout the state. So I know many folks, and the slides aren't advancing, so I know many folks are familiar with the census, so I won't spend much time on that. But it is a constitutional mandate, and it is something we have to do every 10 years. So it's critical that we seize every opportunity to make sure that it is an accurate count. And Anna, I don't know if you could send the slides around, but it's not advancing, so it seems like it'll be kind of a slow process.
Yeah.
So,
I was just going to say, I already sent the slides out to everyone, so everyone should have received them. So hopefully they already have them in front of them. If you want to just continue, yeah.
Sure. So I want to talk briefly about why the census matters. There are several different reasons. First, census data are responsible for allocating billions of federal funds for important programs. And these are programs like Medicaid, Section 8, special education grants, and I'll show some more on the next slide. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Besides this, data from the census are also used for important planning purposes. We need to know where populations are growing so that we can build more schools, construct larger highways, and businesses also use census data to decide where to open new locations or new offices if they see that there is a huge spike in the population, for example. And another sort of way census data are used that we think of traditionally is to determine our governmental representation in Congress. So one point that's interesting is that New Jersey actually lost a seat in Congress after the 2010 census. So there's a lot at stake for us in New Jersey. And then how I use census data, as I mentioned, I use census data in my kids count work, but many folks use census data to show us who is in our community, who lives amongst us. And so nonprofits use data to assess their work, to justify their missions, and to strategize for the future. So census data has a number of different uses. So if you're following along with the slides, the next slide shows a snapshot of some of the programs who rely on census data to allocate federal funds. And you'll see that there's a list ranging from Medicaid, Medicare, to SNAP, to special education grants, to Title I. For example, Medicaid in federal fiscal year 2016 for the state of New Jersey, we received $9.1 billion through Medicaid. And so all told together, $22.7 billion of federal funding was allocated in the state of New Jersey through census data. And if you'd like to see a longer list of programs that are impacted by census data, you can visit Andrew Reamer's Counting for Dollars 2020 project. It's a project out of George Washington University. They have fact sheets on all of the states, and you can navigate to the New Jersey sheet in particular. So I've set the stage for why the census is important. But if you look at the next slide, I'm sure folks are wondering, okay, so why should we be concerned? One reason for concern is that there has been what is called an undercount, meaning certain groups are more likely to be missed than others. And actually, it's called a differential undercount. So you may have heard the term undercount. You may have also heard the term hard to count. They often refer to similar groups, although they have slightly different meanings. An undercount refers to people who were actually missed by the Census Bureau, and then hard to count is a metric that looks at areas with high percentages of households that did not complete their census questionnaires in 2010 through self-response. So I'll explain that a little bit more on the next slide. But what I want to focus on is who is considered hard to count. So on this slide, I have lists of groups, and they range from racial and ethnic minorities to low-income households, non-English speakers, and renters are all considered hard-to-count groups. And of particular interest to ACNJ, as a child advocacy organization, young children under the age of 5 are considered a hard-to-count group, and they were undercounted in the 2010 census. And they were actually the most undercounted age group of any of the age groups counted in the census. So looking at the next slide, what does this look like for the city of Camden, for instance? There are a number of hard-to-count groups living within Camden, but looking at some of the demographic groups, more than 69,000 Camden city residents live in a hard-to-count area. And that's 91% of Camden's total population. So 91% of Camden's total population lives in a neighborhood that is considered hard to count. So this means that a low percentage of households in these areas completed and returned their census forms during the self-response period in 2010. So they mailed back their census forms, a low percentage mailed back their census forms in 2010. And so there's a great deal at stake for Camden as a whole, but when we look at specific demographic groups, we can also see that there are varying degrees to which certain groups are considered hard to count and compared to others. So for African Americans in Camden, 97% lived in hard to count areas. Asian residents, 98% lived in a hard to count area, and for children under age 5, 92% lived in a hard to count area. And though I'm talking a lot about the city of Camden's hard to count population, there are hard to count concentrations throughout our state and throughout South Jersey. So other cities in South Jersey that have hard to count populations, Atlantic City, Pleasantville, Wildwood, Bridgeton, all of these have high concentrations of hard to count groups. And you can actually look at the cities that have these hard to count concentrations on fact sheets that we created at ACNJ, and they're on the Fund for New Jersey's website. They're broken down by New Jersey State Legislative District, as well as Congressional District, and then we have some for specific demographic groups statewide. So they list some of the cities that are considered hard to count in different areas. So on the next slide, you can see here, I have included a map of the city of Camden and the hard to count populations living within Camden. The higher the concentration of red on this map indicates that there are more hard to count populations. And for those of you who aren't looking on the map, it's difficult to explain, but these series of hard to count maps are a project out of the City University of New York. And if you visit Census Hard to Count Maps 2020.us, you can hone in on specific areas and really look at places where there are concentrations of hard to count populations in different communities. The Census Bureau also maintains their own mapping service. It is called Census Rome, R-O-A-M, and it's similar to CUNY, although they use a slightly different metric to map out different areas that might need some additional outreach or intervention when it comes time for Census 2020. But these are great resources to really look at your own communities. So I've kind of given you an overview of who is hard to count, but I want to talk a little bit about why folks are missed. So there are many reasons why individuals might be missed in the census, but some of them might be related to where they live. So if an address isn't listed, they may never receive the mailer. So prior to census forms going out, the Census Bureau does the LUCA process, which is a process by which they work with cities to update addresses in their city to make sure that the Bureau has the correct addresses on file so that when mailers go out, every resident is receiving a mailer. Of course, there are changes and the city may miss some of those mailing addresses, but one of the other issues is that, for instance, my organization is located in Newark, and one of the issues in Newark is that some families may be living in an apartment building that has a basement apartment that is not registered. And so that basement apartment doesn't have an address attributed to it. And the city may not know of that address by design. And so when mailers go out, the folks living in that basement apartment will never receive that mailer. Another reason why folks may be missed is because they may not be included on their questionnaire. So this is a problem for houses with multiple families dwelling in them. One family may complete the form and not include the other families living in the same unit as them because they consider them separate. But this is also a really big concern for young children under the age of 5 who are often left off the form by their parents. And the reasons for that are complicated and it's difficult to pinpoint to any one specific reason, but that is a major reason why young children were missed. And I just want to make a note that this indicates that when we do our sort of census outreach, census messaging, the message needs to not just be to complete the census, but it needs to be complete the census accurately and include everyone who lives in your home. Another reason why folks are missed is because of they live in what are called complex households. And this is a term that's used to describe basically any home that isn't a nuclear family. Again, thinking of multifamily dwellings, but also thinking of children who live with a resource or a foster parent or multi-generational households are also considered complex households. So there's often confusion over how to count people in these types of households. For instance, in a multi-generational household, let's say that's grandparent-led, that has adult children with their own children living in that household, because the grandparents may see their adult child and then their grandchild as sort of a separate entity, they may not include them on their census responses. And so we just want to be making sure that we are messaging to people to include everyone. And then some other reasons why folks may be undercounted is relating to their usual place of residence. So individuals who are highly transient can be missed because identifying where they live most of the time is challenging. Ian did a great job explaining the homeless enumeration and transitory locations process of locating those kinds of folks. But one thing that we're really cognizant of is couch surfers who may not consider themselves homeless, and they may be missed by the traditional self-response outreach and also by the homeless enumeration process. So it's really important that we recognize that these are the sorts of groups and the sorts of reasons why people are missed. So I've given some context as to why the census is important, who is often missed, and why they're often missed, but I want to provide some solutions. As Ian mentioned, the Census Bureau knows that they need some trusted messengers in the community to spread the message about the importance of the census. And funders have a role in spreading the message about census outreach. It's important to remember that the data collected in 2020 is going to be used for the next 10 years. And since AC&J is a child advocacy organization, we always like to say that a 2-year-old that is missed in the 2020 census won't be counted again until they're 12. And if you think about all of the services that a child may have accessed from the time that they are 2 until they are 12, being absent from that process can have a really large impact. So there are a number of resources to funders. The Funders Committee for Civic Participation has their Funders Census Initiative, and they're encouraging funders to participate, convene, and invest. Funders have access to large networks, and so they can educate their staff and networks on issues relating to census, as well as educating key policymakers on the importance of this issue. Disclaimer, AC&J actually got involved in census work because of the work of a funder, and that person was Kiki Jamieson, who's going to talk a little bit more about what funders can do, but funders can really play a critical role in motivating grantees and bringing this issue to grantees who are well positioned to sort of tackle census outreach and census messaging. So it's important that funders identify grantees who can sustain this work into their existing operations because perhaps they regularly conduct outreach with different hard-to-count groups, or they're in a particularly hard-to-count community. There's a myriad of ways that funders can sort of activate grantees. And one of these ways may be providing support to organizations so that they can host things like job fairs. Right now, the census, as Ian mentioned, is really ramping up the hiring process. And so providing support to grantees to host a job fair, to provide food for folks who attend is something that funders can be involved in. Another way funders can be involved is supporting grantees to conduct outreach activities. So hosting a census day in March and April, encouraging families to complete their forms, helping groups to obtain resources to print flyers and materials for families in their program. And as I said, I know Kiki's going to speak a bit more about this, so I will leave it there. I think I'm a little early, but if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, again, you can type it in the chat and I'll read it out, or you can just unmute your line and ask Alana. But I just want to say thank you, Alana and Ian, for bearing with us as we work through these technical difficulties, and thank you to everyone on the line. I'm sorry about this, but hopefully everyone has received the slides, and I sent some links for the hard-to-count maps and the census roam, and I'll also follow up with all this information afterwards. But yeah, does anyone have any questions for Alana right now? Wait a few minutes in the chat. Okay, well, if anyone has any other questions, they can certainly, yes, *6 to unmute, or unmute using the microphone if you're using a laptop. But if anyone has any questions, again, you can just type them into the chat box. We'll make sure they get answered before the end of the webinar. And then If there's nothing, I'll hand it over to Kate again to introduce our last speaker.
Okay, great. So next up is Kiki Jamieson, President of the Fund for New Jersey. The Fund for New Jersey supports agencies of social change, policy analysis, and research. Acknowledging the importance of an accurate and complete count, the Fund for New Jersey has identified many ways that funders can support census efforts in their local communities and reach out to their networks for support. Kiki Jamieson has been a leader for philanthropic support of the 2020 census in our state, speaking on countless panels and presenting on many events around this topic. I'll now turn it over to Kiki, who will speak about how your organizations and you all as funders can get more involved.
Thanks very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with all of you today, and thank you very much to Ian and Alana for giving such a great overview of the challenges and opportunities we have to count everybody in New Jersey. Particular focus on Camden, but of course this goes throughout the state. When every single resident in New Jersey is counted, every single resident in New Jersey will benefit. And you have heard a lot today about the challenges, but I'm going to focus my remarks on the opportunities, and they are many. First of all, you should know that I think New Jersey is better organized, better equipped, better prepared to approach a complete count in Census 2020 than it maybe ever has been before. There is a thoughtful, coordinated, and strategic effort that Alana described involving a statewide network of nonprofit organizations who have been working over the past year to spread the word, educate partners, do targeted outreach to some of the state's hardest to count areas, and to figure out ways to build upon the strengths and relationships that already exist so that Census 2020 can be folded into the regular and ongoing work of nonprofit and civic organizations. As they've mentioned, the census determines everything related to funding and representation, and there's not a single nonprofit organization that won't benefit from having a more complete, accurate and accurate count. In addition, New Jersey's nonprofit and civic community are working very closely with both the U.S. Census Bureau and with the Secretary of State's office here to coordinate efforts. We recognize that there is more work to be done than there are resources to support it, so we have to be thoughtful and effective and efficient in everything we do. That said, there are lots of opportunities for funders to join with other funders who are already involved to support this effort, and I just want to describe a few of those ways right now. First of all, funding has been coming in either through funders doing their own grants to existing grantees, existing partner organizations to help them expand their own work in order to take on some census outreach. And at the same time, many of our fellow foundations have contributed to pooled funds related to the census. The Princeton Area Community Foundation is hosting a pooled fund, and that money will help us to fill in the gaps between the state and other foundation money that comes in. As all of us funders know, New Jersey's philanthropic landscape is varied. Many funders in the state are place-based and place-focused, which is a terrific benefit for those places. But it does mean that there are other places that miss out. And the pooled fund will help us to fill in those gaps so that hard-to-count communities that are not part of a funder's natural footprint will also be able to get some support to help make sure its residents are counted. The funding that needs to happen now and has been ongoing and really we need to double down on now is funding to help support organizing and planning for a complete count to make sure that the hardest to count areas have designated nonprofit or civic partners who are willing to take the lead in organizing their own neighborhoods to make sure that accurate information is distributed, that community members understand what the census is and why it matters, and also so that they have an opportunity to actually participate, to understand how to do that and have the information that will support them. Other funding is needed for training to enable community leaders and organizations to spread the word. This is not something that can be done top-down. It's not something that will be effective only with public service announcements. It really needs that voice-to-voice network of trusted leaders to help people understand and why this matters. The third area for funding is related to messaging and outreach to make sure that we are spreading the messages in culturally appropriate ways in the languages that are most comfortable to communities, and that we are using media transport, community-based media, ethnic media, social media, that will best reach our audiences. And finally, funding is needed for mini grants of the sort that Alana described to help host events, buy food for community meetings, provide the kind of local level support for the activities and outreach needed to spread the word. And all these things can happen either directly through your own foundation funding to existing grantees or new grantees, or in a coordinated way with other funders through this pooled fund that exists at the Princeton Area Community Foundation. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the details of that. In the meantime, the big message I want to offer is that this is a challenge, but it is doable. We're already on our way to supporting a complete count in New Jersey, and if we all work together, I have full confidence that we can exceed the response rates we had in the last census and do a much better job of making sure that everybody is counted. Thank you. I see there's a question. There's a question in the chat box asking if the Princeton Community Foundation is covering all of New Jersey, and it is. So the pooled fund is housed there because it is sometimes easier for funders to contribute to a community foundation than to a private foundation, but the funding itself will go throughout the state with focus on hard-to-count areas and focus on areas that might not otherwise have access to funding. We are also cooperating closely with the New Jersey Department of State, which is operating a grants program using state funding to help support activities led by counties and nonprofit organizations. And through our close cooperative relationship with the Department of State, we are able to make sure that our funding is not duplicative.
And I just have, this is Anna from the council, I just have a quick question to pose to all the speakers while we wait for some other questions to come in. And that's just, you know, we brought up this topic of for the southern part of the state. Are there any specific challenges or opportunities that people getting involved in census efforts should know about southern New Jersey?
Yes, well, one thing, this is Kiki, one thing people could know and could help us with is right now there are no South Jersey specific funders who have joined in specifically to fund census work. So the southern part of the state is a gap we're trying to fill, and so there's a lot of opportunity. In terms of community outreach needs, I think my understanding is that community-based work has been slower to develop in Salem and Gloucester counties in particular, and so definitely more work is needed there. Work is now ongoing in Camden, and we're really excited about how the Camden County work has begun to develop so quickly this fall.
Hey, Kiki, this is Christine Lilly. Just a quick question. I was just looking at the map, and like the schools that we support, one of them for sure is in like the red zone in South Camden. What's the role of schools in this, and both public and private? Has there been good community partners in that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think probably best handled by Ian. if he's there.
Absolutely, I'm still here. And that's a great question. And I briefly mentioned it. We do have the Statistics in Schools program, and I'll put the link to that in the chat box in just a moment. But it is a program that was successful in prior censuses, and we've started to roll it out. Again, it offers grade appropriate curriculum and activities that schools can take right now to start to engage their students, and then do so even more next year when the census is going on. Because schools are trusted places. And I think oftentimes if we can link the trusted places and enable them to carry the message for us about the census, that could be an awesome opportunity if they are that trusted voice. So the kids going home to their grandparents and sharing that they learned about the census in school today, it's super simple. And if they're able to, maybe they can help their grandparents respond to the census online. And I think that could be a great avenue. And maybe to even expand on that a little bit is identifying, again, other trusted voices in the community. And one example that we've heard recently was Head Start. So Head Start might be a trusted voice for community members because it's a place where they know that their children are safe and are receiving services and education. But Head Start is also a federal program that receives funding based on the decennial census count. So about $675 billion is allocated on an annual basis based on census counts. So now we've linked it. We've linked a trusted voice with an actual benefit to the census. So that Head Start teacher or program administrator can explain to the aunt that picks up the child from school about the importance of the census. And then maybe we can even take it a step further and have an ability for that caregiver to complete the census at that Head Start program or at that school, at a school event, at a parent-teacher conference event. Add some tablets that are available for people to self-respond. So we link that. We link that trusted voice, a benefit to the census, a service that someone's already receiving, and then maybe to give them that opportunity. And I think schools are a great place for that.
So just a quick follow-up, just because the holidays are coming up and there's convening of parents, and just in Camden in particular, there's 1,000 kids in the partnership schools that our foundation invests in, and we could easily communicate out with those 5 schools. And the holiday is a time when, people come together for different things at the schools, so it could be an opportunity. So I have to do a follow-up just to get any info that I can about that, I guess. And also in the preschool and after-school programs, too, that are funded by state funding. I don't know if those folks would be more inclined to care about this. But
so this is Alana Vega from ACNJ. We've been doing a lot of work with the preschool programs because of the undercount of young children, and I think that pre-K providers are very invested in this, even though, like you said, it's a state-funded program. They recognize that there's, many of these schools are Title I schools. There is a connection there. And we've also been working with child care centers, too, because that's also that trusted link in the community. I just wanted to add that in.
Is there a list of the community partners in Camden, like family services, and do you guys have a list of existing partners?
Well, this sounds like a question for Thomas.
Yeah, this is so we're actually getting that together. We just kind of shared our first sort of meeting through the county's complete count committee. So Carmen Rodriguez is going to be the chairperson, who is the director of Health and Family Services. So we're already in there. She just called me last night because we were at a meeting together yesterday for Code Blue was the meeting she was in, and then I was in another networking meeting down at the Kroc Center, who is also going to partner with us in sharing our message just on a lot of their social media, which they have within the building. But getting the list together, we will be doing that shortly. I know that Mr. Rhodes, who was the complete count committee chair for the county, has culminated a list that we can get from him as well. But we've had partners already working on our behalf prior to even getting Carmen in as the city's Complete Count Committee chairperson. I'm actually sitting at, for even the township of Pennsauken, I'm sitting at their library, and as we were having the conference here, I just texted Ian that there was the Marshall School and the workforce, the one stop from Cherry Hill for Camden County was sitting next to me. I just got their cards, and we just talked about the whole concept of getting that information through the schools. They're going to obviously give me some feedback to say where we are with some of the stuff that Ian talked about earlier about statistics in schools that the superintendent should have received that back in August, to see where we're at with that. We can get that list for you. We should be able to do the Camden rather quickly. I know that we have the Camden County already done.
That is great.
Final, meaning that we're still adding more and more partners.
That is really helpful. When you have that, if you share that out, that would be great. And this is my last question. I'll close my mouth. We have a big issue with, like, in East Camden with the whole immigration issue, and so many of our families are so paralyzed about reporting any information or like speaking to folks about like this. And so we used to hold sessions schools where it was kind of considered a bit of a sanctuary where families could ask questions about things. This was more related to immigration issues, because we have 600 Latino families in the partnership. And I wonder what can be done, or what your experience has been around helping families that might be worried about immigration issues to still participate in the census. How the messaging to overcome fear.
Well, I'll be honest with you, and that's interesting that you brought that up. So again, in Camden, what we've kind of put together is sort of like the same initiatives. Again, coming back to Pennsauken, Camden being the same area, it actually initiated there, where we actually had during a presentation that my boss's boss, Lisa, came down and did. Lisa Moore was at the Kroc Center. Councilwoman Torres had one of the teachers from one of the schools, which is predominantly heavily populated by families of Mexico, showed up. She encouraged them to come to hear more about what the census is about, that it's not something to be fearful of. But what she had spoke about, the teacher that they trusted, that's why they came, was just that they're fearful of signing and filling out any forms. They have a free lunch program for the kids. They won't fill out that form as it pertains to the fear of potential deportation, is what she said. So our concept was, between some of the nonprofits here in Camden, was we need to get together, bring those trusted voices together, and have a candid conversation about what are the fears. And it may not just be with just the census, but overall in general. And hopefully, as we talk about it, it might become a little bit less fearful, one, based on the information and the security of the information that is provided, but then also that you're hearing from others that are highly involved within the community that support, obviously, the raising of those children, the support of those families. And I found that to be very, very, very powerful. We had our first meeting, as I said, for Pennsauken. There was a gentleman, Jose Gonzalez, that typically comes to this library, and he gathered those individuals, because he walked me through from Pennsauken, from Camden to Pennsauken. He knew exactly the blocks and how they have changed over the last 20 years based on the populations that live there. And he was identifying, this is who we need to have to come, because this is their fear factor. And I said, okay, because what we have is what we have, but what they have is a much stronger message to convince or convict somebody to actually participate based on what it means to actually do the census from what we give them.
Yeah, that is the reality. Thank you for sharing that. And that just from my work on some political stuff on advocacy, we really found like the only way to, there's two messages. The first message is, who do you trust is giving the message, and then it's the message itself. So if, I'm going to talk more offline, obviously, with you guys over time, but maybe I can help to identify trusted members of the community that can be sharing out these messages as an informal way to do this, because, it's a big issue, at least in East Camden for sure.
Yeah. I mean, and I just, like I said, I was sitting next to this group that was in a sort of like not a cubicle, but we're not so much soundproof booths, but one of the documents that they talked about in terms of getting folks within the schools to get certain items, the same thing came about here in Camden. She says, I have this form that allows the family or the students to receive this kind of support, but the family is fearful of even filling that out to get that support that would then help those children move forward in either getting opportunities to do shadow days, and this is for employment opportunities as well. I was like, wow, you're talking our language, and to hear what they're trying to do is the same conversation that we need to have, and who are you bringing into that conversation to have those families feel more comfortable doing that to support their children to move forward, because that would then support them looking to fill out and participate next year in the Census 2020.
Right. Thank you.
And then this isn't a question, but a comment. Eric from the Community Foundation of South Jersey said that while they don't have a fund dedicated to support census work, they have continued to build relationships in the southern 8 counties, including Gloucester and Salem counties, and they're more than happy to connect with people about outreach in those areas. So, Eric, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more to that, but thank you for sending that out in the chat. And then if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat or speak up now. You can, I think, *6 to mute and unmute.
So this is Kiki. We are so grateful for the wonderful outreach and education work that Eric, in particular, and Andy have been doing. That also emphasized that money is not the only thing we need, right? I mean, money is needed because it helps to support exactly these kinds of activities. But at the end of the day, it's about communication with a trusted person giving a message that is accurate and can be heard to an audience that needs to hear it. So there are many ways to do that, and spreading the word to existing grantees and asking them to build this into their messaging is yet another way to advance the cause.
Thanks for that, Kiki. This is Andy. I would just add, as we've launched our Transform South Jersey efforts in the 8 southern counties, we've done a series of workshops, and Eric has done a tremendous job of building 80 of the 203 South Jersey towns and starting to bring them into a relationship with us. To the extent that we're not a trusted advisor yet, we're continuing to place our flag, if you will, in all the southern 8 counties and build those trust relationships. But to the extent we can leverage on that as part of census work, whether it's consideration of a fund in the future or some other way to leverage those relationships, we're happy to do so and be part of the solution.
Great, thank you. So if there's no other questions, I'll pass it off to Sandy, our other Camden Affinity Group co-chair. Sandy, do you have any questions for other speakers, or do we have any questions we want to ask the group?
This is Christine O'Donnell. Can I jump in with a question?
Oh, sorry, sure.
Sorry, I thought I couldn't tell if I was on mute or not. Thank you so much for all of this. I honestly, I count answering the census as a civic duty as much as serving on a jury or paying your taxes. So thank you for really the service that all of you are doing and will continue to do over the next year as we launch in. And similar to the question about how schools can be involved, I'm wondering if there are corporations involved in getting the word out in a workplace, or if that has some, if there's thought that might have some detriment.
Well, Christine,
I'll
this is
say this.
Sandy. Go ahead, someone else spoke up?
No, go ahead, Sandy.
No, I just wanted, a lot of the questions that I had noted have already been asked in one way or another. But to talk about Christine's question about what a corporation's doing, I think that there's a lot of things each corporation can do, just getting it out to their employees. But I think that there's also opportunities to help spread the word in the community. And before I talk on that, I think it was Thomas. Do you want to go ahead, and then I'll add my thoughts and another question or comment?
Okay. I was just going to say that basically when you look at our complete count committees and what we're trying to do, it is at a community level, but then, where you have large organizations, be it hospital-based, be it manufacturing-based, where many of the community works. Our goal is to incorporate and to involve everybody. So if we are able to put up any type of flyers, any type of information related to the 2020 census in their break rooms, in their areas where OSHA has them to put up stuff, but you can't cover it up, but where you're able to put up stuff that would elevate that, I would say that our complete count committees, be it in Cumberland County, be it in Camden County, I'm a little partial because these are my counties, that, they are making their way through that process, because that, where we can get our voice out, we need to make that happen. So I know that we are on it, but again, with individuals that may have deeper connections or connections with, we are open for any support to help us get that information through those doors to those employees, so that they obviously are well prepared when it comes time to complete their census questionnaire. I'll say the one in Camden would be probably Campbell Soup. Would be a huge operation that, in some way, form, or fashion of having us down there. Cooper Hospital's the same. Already, Jim Rhodes is already on that one for sure. I think he's got some inroads into Campbell, but if somebody else can help, that'd be great.
This is Kiki, just to jump in. So what I've heard from corporate partners, that there are a number of ways to get involved. One is as major employers, anchor employers, they can share that information with their employees and ask them to share it with their families and neighborhoods. Second, some of their corporate foundation arms or corporate giving arms have contributed to this statewide effort. Third, those who have customer service centers or other places that in which the public is welcome in, whether it is a customer service center or a bank branch or some other gathering place like that, can resolve to make information about the census available in those places. I know a couple are even talking about making tablets available in those places. So if people are coming in to pay a bill or to manage some transaction, they also could access a tablet and complete their census form at the same time. They can, others are thinking about putting a banner on their website or including even notifications in with customer bills to let people know it's census time and it's important to participate.
Thanks, Kiki. This is Sandy again. One of the things that come to mind, since we all have Camden partners, does anybody have any thoughts on how we could work collaboratively without duplicating efforts and ensure that we are reaching all sections of the city?
So this is Kiki. I think there are two options, and I'll let Thomas jump in too. But one is to have a representative join and work with Camden's Complete Count Committee. There is a Complete Count Committee at the county. There's also one in formation at the city. So those are ways to share information and coordinate. A third way is a model that we've seen developed in Trenton, which is a Complete Count Committee of the nonprofit community, where a number of key nonprofits have decided to work together to think about how they can maximize the effort and be as effective as possible at getting the word out.
Yeah, those are definitely strong points in terms of getting the word out based on, partnering with the Complete Count Committee, because that is a driving force to be focused on, obviously getting that message out. And if it that deals with the diversity in terms of languages, in terms of population, and getting those right people on each Complete Count Committee, and then subdividing them, as we've done in Cumberland County, even down to the faith-based community, governmental, business, nonprofit. But even now, in speaking to a lot of, like even yesterday, speaking to some of the pastors that were there yesterday, based on their populations, I'm finding out that they're eager to make sure, based on maybe having similar technology available next March, to make sure that their count is right, meaning that they know pretty much what is their membership. It could be 2,500, could be 3,000, could be more. Their goal is to take it upon themselves with leadership in even those locations to say, I'm going to be my own Complete Count Committee. I'm going to make sure that by the time we finish the actual census for 2020, that I know that for the most part, I've gotten 3,000 of my, or at least if you're taking a family of two, you make sure that number is close to what you know to be your members. They are that eager to want to do this based on the fact that they have a great understanding of what it represents in terms of the numbers. So definitely we need to have our Complete Count Committees full with as many organizations and people as possible, but at the same time, if you break it down to a smaller unit that they have to deal with and they know the numbers, they are much more encouraged to actually go and do it, even if it just be a block. But again, that's getting out, speaking with the right people, and getting them encouraged and involved to want to do that. And many of the folks, based on the interaction, have been very encouraged to do it.
Thank you. Let me ask this question. Is there any interest from the Camden funders on perhaps having a meeting with Thomas or the Complete Count Committee at a later date, just to see how it's going and what efforts would be most valuable?
I mean, I'll say this, if it's for me, I would think it'd be a benefit, because again, what I learn every time I talk to those that are either not a part of the Complete Count Committees, but then when I hear from them, because I challenge them with what are our challenges? What do you think, based on a trusted voice within our community? How do we then overcome that? I know before the call, me and Ian were kind of talking, and there's some things that I learned the other day about, which I wouldn't have thought was going to be a challenge. And I'm not sure if money inserted into the process would help, but at least if the funders may hear some of the challenges of what actually is confronting potential participants and not participating, it may raise, something. I'm not sure what, but I think it would give them a greater insight as to what may be the challenges, and if money may not be the cure for it, maybe they may have something else that could support us. Because I know one of the ones, outside of fearful of retaliation about having information filled out, was to the extent that if I'm living with my grandparents and they're on assistance from the federal government, and I fill that out, or we fill this out, is that going to cut us because I live here?
Yeah, I know that there are some unique challenges here, or unique to a city like Camden and others in the state. I don't have any specific questions. Does anybody else have any questions?
No, just thanks for all this information.
Yeah, and this is Sandy. If I could just take 1 minute here, since this actually is my last meeting as co-chair of the Camden Funders, I am retiring from Subaru in January. So I would like to introduce the new manager of philanthropy, Liz Edelin, who is actually on the phone with us today.
Hello. Thank you.
Hey, welcome.
I will be sending something out to, through Anna, to share Liz's contact, but it has been my pleasure to work with all of you for more than 3 decades. I may be retiring, but I'm calling it refocusing, so you never know where I will show up again.
Thanks so much, Sandy.
Yes, thank you, Sandy. And I'm sorry we couldn't announce that in person and meet Liz in person, but yeah, I'll of course share that contact information as well as, you know, the slides and some follow-up links for everybody. But I just want to say, you know, thank you so much to our Camden co-chairs, Sandy and Kate from Campbell Soup for, you know, helping with this program. Thank you so much to our speakers, Kiki, Jamieson, Ian Hall from the Census Bureau, and Alana Vega from ACNJ. And thank you to all of you for bearing with us as we worked through technical difficulties. I think all in all, at the end, it was a really, you know, pretty interactive webinar, and people got to ask a lot of questions, and we had a great conversation. So thank you all again. And before I end and ask people to fill out a survey, which I will also send as a follow-up, Sandy or Kate, do you have anything else you want to say before we close out?
I don't think so. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I don't think so. Thanks all for joining in this call.
Okay. So thank you again. There's if you could take a minute to fill out the survey. If you see the slides, the link is right there. But if not, I will also follow up with that. So, oh, and then also there's from Community Foundation of South Jersey. Again, they would be happy to engage in future meetings. So if anyone's interested in any future meetings for the Camden funders around the census or any other topic, please let us know. Thank you, everybody, again so much, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.